Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale German SDKFZ 222 armored car. It's been a little while since I had any updates on this project. However, due to all the other commission builds that I was working on before, this project here was kind of set aside in order to focus on those builds. With those builds now out of the way, I have now turned my attention to this 222 and focusing on getting it completed. Since the last video, a lot of progress and focus has been concentrated on the armored car's flak gun carriage. Since the last video update, a lot more progress has been added to the component, and in its current state here, the carriage is approximately 60% complete. While in this state, it gives me the opportunity to go ahead and walk through some of the features that are found on the flak gun, which are mounted inside the 222 armored car. Starting with the gunner section, the flak gun, which is found on the 222 armored car, is similar in layout to a lot of other heavy weapons in that the weapon is actually fired from foot pedals. If we notice, there are two pedals. One pedal is to fire the flak gun, while the other pedal is to fire the coaxial MG34. The pedals are mounted on this very complex little frame. The frame is suspended actually from the center portion of the carriage. The frame itself can pivot since it is connected to the carriage. The pedals are mounted on a little floorboard that also acts as a footrest when the gun is not being fired by the crewman. The floorboards themselves are connected to this elaborate tray, like I mentioned before. It's all tube construction. And connects in circles around to the back portion here of the gun. As for the front portion, it is suspended by this elaborate tube structure. Now, if we notice, the tube is not one piece. It's actually comprised of the separate segments that are actually threaded together. The purpose of the threading of the pieces together is that you can fine tune and adjust the component's height so that everything is at the proper height. This component here connects to the front portion of the carriage and keeps and actually suspends the whole unit from the front and gives it stability and support. As for the back portion, is where the mount gets very interesting. The back portion does a lot of things. It gives support for the bottom frame. It also houses the connections for boat crewman seats. And on top of that, it also acts as the channel in which the firing linkages move its way up to the gun. The way the guns would be fired is the linkages are connected to the pedals. When the gunner would step on the pedal, it would pull a link that would run along this portion here of the floorboard. Now, as we have here, this is a sheet metal guard to prevent any damage from happening to the linkages. The linkages are all present on the model. As you can see, both linkages run up to this portion here. If we notice, there are two large clevises that come off of the mount. The purpose of the clevises is that the linkages connect to them. The clevis then has two other rods that would run inside this pipe over here to then where they would emerge from the opposite end over here. On this end here of the tube, there are two smaller clevises, which then have rods that would run up through this pipe here to this top portion of the gun mount, and then from here there would be two long push rods that would enter up to the top portion of the carriage mount, in which there it would enter two more ball linkages, in which then it would connect to the triggering on both the flak gun as well as the MG34. More on that is to follow. As for the the seats, the gunner has a bucket style seat, and the seats on both left and right hand side are actually fully adjustable. They can go up and down this support arm over here and can pivot left to right. The design is very similar to that which is what's found on drill presses. Now, in addition to the seat being able to pivot up and down, the seat can also pivot from the mount itself. The gunner seat can be elevated and lowered via this crank handle over here. You would simply turn this crank handle, and that would elevate and lower the seat. Now, as for the main arm itself, that is adjusted via this handle over here. You would simply loosen the handle, adjust the seat, and crank down on it in order to lock it in place. This same design is identical to the loader side of the gun. The only difference is that the loader's seat is that of a simple bench stool rather than the bucket seat, which is found on the opposite side. Moving to the gunner, he also has a footrest, although unlike the opposite side, which has that elaborate trigger mechanism, since the gunner does not need any controls to fire the guns, his footrest is just a simple angular German diamond plate panel. Moving up from the crew seats takes us to the mounts for the turret. As you can see, the 222's gun actually connects to the turret via these two lugs. One is mounted on the front, and the second is mounted on the rear. On the real armored car, there is a bracket that bolts to the carriage, and that bracket would then have a elaborate linkage system in which it would then mount to a corresponding component on the turret. This way, when the gun rotates, the turret will move in unison as it is locked to the gun carriage. As you can see, this design feature was mimicked on the rest of the model here, and this brace here actually bolts to the carriage in the exact same format. As you notice, real fasteners have been used for this application. For the rear portion of the gun, that connects to the rear portion of the turret via this bent channel component. This bent channel component is actually then bolted to the gun carriage frame that you see here, again with real fasteners. Unlike the one in the front, in which there's a complex little linkage system, in the back it's going to be facilitated with a large set screw, and more information on that is to come. Moving to the front portion of the gun takes us to the gearboxes for the actual rotation and elevation. To rotate the gun, this is done via a large crank wheel, which will be mounted in this location here. As you can see, it has some elaborate detailing to it. And on the real 222 armored car, this piece too is also fully adjustable. You can pivot and adjust it to better suit the gunner. Another feature that was built into the model that is present on the real 222 is that of the counterweight system that we have here. To counterweight the heavy weight of the gun mounted to and the carriage, the 222 features a spring buffer system. The spring buffer is contained in this large shock absorber over here, and that is mounted directly to the carriage. It is then connected to the gun cradle via this roller chain. The roller chain is connected to this large hook up here, and this component here is what puts all the force on the spring to keep the gun at a level weight. Now, one interesting feature was that because for the model, the only way to replicate this was to use real roller chain. Otherwise, the gun would stay in a fixed, steady position. So I actually designed the component to work just like the real one. Inside of this canister here is the actual spring buffer system. Real roller chain was utilized, and works just like it would on the real 222 armored car. The spring does actually prevent the gun from drooping, specifically once more components get added to the cradle that will make it heavier, namely the component for the shell ejection port as well as the MG34 gun mount. Also, once the barrel and the muzzle brake get added to the actual flak gun itself, it would add a lot more sufficient weight that would tend to make the system droop. However, with the spring buffer system, that will not be the case, and the component will stay fully taut no matter where it is positioned. As for the top portion of the spring mount, there is a small brass cover plate, which once the model progresses will simply be mounted to this component just like it is on the real 222. The way the spring mount is affixed to the gun carriage is in a way that does not inhibit the gun from recoiling, like I mentioned in the previous video. If we recall, the flak gun, is mounted to this cradle, and the cradle actually has some sort of a shock-absorbing recoil dampening system that reduces the recoil on the suspension of the armored car itself. As you can see, that system here is still fully functional. Another benefit of having the spring aided buffer is that the tension of the spring forces the two elevation gears to actually mesh into each other. Like I might have mentioned in the other video, the gears are actually fully functional and will rotate with the carriage as it is positioned up or down. And that concludes this project update video for this 1/6 scale German SDKFZ 222 armored car. If you like this video, stop by and like us on Facebook, and don't forget to check out EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thank you.